Welcome to the NFRW Empower Hour. I am Glennis Chester, your host for the series that provides in-depth discussions on issues that are forefront in today's culture and gives you the tools to speak with authority on the topics that are important today. Today's program is going to be fantastic. Whether you are actively recruiting or just doing your due diligence to assure that your vote is cast for the very best candidate possible, you'll want to learn how to identify, develop, and vet quality candidates. So our speaker this evening has made candidate recruitment a central strategy in flipping blue districts. But more than that, she utilizes partnerships with training organizations like ours in developing those candidates so that every one of us can play a pivotal role in taking our country back. So I can't wait to get into this. But before we get into introducing our speaker, our little bit of housekeeping must be done. Please remember to mute yourselves and stay muted throughout the program. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat. We'll be taking those throughout the program. A huge thank you to Erica Watley and Kim Bowers who are providing tech support for tonight's program, because without them, this would not be possible. I don't do anything technical. And finally, please don't forget to tell your clubs that every one of our episodes for this and the bite-sized tools are recorded and archived on the NFRW website. So they can go on in a week or so and see this program and every one we've done throughout the term just by logging on to the NFRW resource library. There we go. The resource library. Just put it in your credentials on the NFRW website. Go to the resource library and you'll see all of our programs archived there. Okay, so now let's introduce our speaker for this evening. I'm so excited. My guest is one of the most genuinely hardworking and fascinating women that I am privileged to know. Her name is Kat Parks. She is a former rodeo queen. I know, right? And a college equestrian instructor. She worked as a board-certified trauma nurse. She is a breast cancer survivor. She began her political involvement as the chairman of her local county party. Yes, that's where she started, was as the chairman of her county party, and quickly became a household name because of her strong beliefs in fair elections and her fearless fight for everyday Texans. Under her leadership as vice chairman of the state GOP, the number of Republican candidates in the 2022 midterm election increased by over 900% over the previous cycle, the vast majority of these in traditionally blue districts. When she is not all over the state training candidates and inspiring patriots like us, she runs a horse ranch with her husband, John, and her wonderful son, Pierce, which to know him is to love him. He is the most darling boy you have ever met. Kat is the epitome of grit and grace and is my friend. Kat, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Glennis, thank you. So are you happy with me just taking off and running with this?
Just go ahead, jump right in.
Okay, ladies, welcome everyone. I'm glad to be here with you this evening. And I asked Glennis if she would mind if we do something that's maybe a little more interactive. So for those of you who are comfortable with using the chat, I want you to feel free. I'm going to ask some questions and look for your responses there. And we will take questions throughout, although we will set aside time for questions at the end. How many of you, let's start out with this question. How many of you are from blue states? If you want to type into the chat what states you are from, feel free to enter in there. And I'll just share with you something that we don't like to admit too much out loud in Texas, but I grew up in a state called Illinois. And we're a little afraid to admit that because when people think of Illinois, they think of Barack Obama and the Illinois Chicago Democrat machine. I also have a business in New Mexico. Any New Mexicans on here tonight? And so have also operated a business in a very blue state. But I do have to remind people coming back to the Illinois thing that some good things also came from Illinois, namely Ronald Reagan and Abraham Lincoln. So I want to talk about candidate recruitment from the perspective of what can we do? How can we make a difference? Because I believe that every single person can make a difference. And candidate recruitment, and whether it's identifying candidates, developing candidates, or vetting candidates, is something that we can all be involved in, that we can all believe in. It's a very safe place to exist. And let me explain what I mean by that. We all want our representation to function better. As Republicans and conservatives, we believe that competition makes us better. And so while as the vice chair, I was absolutely not out there recruiting Republicans to run against other Republicans, I can tell you that there is value in loaded primaries. There is value in open seats where we have, say, a congressman retire and we have 20 people jump in. And I've had some unique experiences to be involved in all of those things. So I'll talk to you a little bit about my history, because I think candidate recruitment is actually part of a broader conversation about recruiting, which we should be doing all the time as Republican women to increase the number of people who are out there. And so as Glennis said, my very first Republican meeting in Texas was a meeting where I was appointed county chair. And I think that's a very important story to start with, because it says to all of us that there are conservative women out there who have voted conservative, or maybe even realistically, for those of you who really dig down and get in the weeds, maybe they don't have the greatest voting record. Maybe they have moved recently. Maybe they haven't, kept up with college, jobs, chasing kids, whatever, turning out. Are we only looking for Republicans who we label 4 out of 4s to get involved in the process? And the answer should be no. Because when we find those ladies who share our principles, who we see that are capable community leaders, we should be finding them and selecting them as candidates. Now, of course, primary voter history is important. We would like to not see Democrats back there unless, and this is where I'm going to jump right into some controversial things, into some things that are pretty tough. We have some counties in Texas that are along the border that had never had a Republican primary, never had Republican candidates. And so if you haven't had a Republican primary, what is your only voter history going to be? It's going to be for Democrats. And so we have to look at what is the district. We also have to look at things like there have been a lot of changes of heart that we've seen. If we pull up the voter registration rolls and we see in 2008, a lot of people who were new to the political scene or who were motivated or they were inspired by this idea of Barack Obama became disillusioned with this idea as they saw how it played out, how it affected their families, their pocketbooks, and our country. The question is can we forgive them for that when we're talking 8 years later, 10 years later, 12 years later down the line? And my answer to that would also be a resounding yes. Now, what you will see is, and if you are from one of those blue states or from one of those purple states that it's out there, you may have an impression of Texas like I did much of my life. And that was, to me, Texas was Camelot. Texas was the red shining city on the hill. And in many regards, it is. We have had Republican state elected officials for the last 20 years. And so that is nothing to sneeze at. But like other states, our urban areas are becoming blue. And we are fighting an uphill battle. We have a long history along the border, along the Texas-Mexico border, of those areas that are predominantly Hispanic being blue. And that's sort of where I fit in with the things that we were able to accomplish in Texas. So I was asked to be in charge of candidate recruitment in going into the 2020 cycle. And I think this is important because we had a big hurdle to overcome. And one of the myths that exists and is out there is that you shouldn't run Republicans in Democrat areas because it will make all the Democrats come to the polls for the first time. Anybody ever heard that myth before? Okay. I think it's safe to say that we knew going into 2020 where Donald Trump was going to be on the ballot. He was a controversial figure, whether you were on their side, our side, or in between. We knew that everybody and their brother was going to turn out for that election. And so this was the time to experiment and to really pull from our candidate bases. And so we tried to find someone to fill every single congressional seat in Texas. And we had 5 open seats that year. We tried to find someone for every single seat that we could find. We identified over over 600 openings where we found Democrat incumbents. And I would encourage you ladies that this is the nuts and bolts and not the exciting part of it. But in Texas, we needed to go through every single county. We needed to go through the district courts. The congressional level was easy. We needed to find where are the Democrat incumbents in office. And so this is how you really break it down and get into the black and white. And so first of all, someone had to look up all of those things. There's no centralized database. If you have it in your state, you are very lucky. We had to look it up by county. And you can break that down even further, all the way down through your school board races and through your municipal races. In the state of Texas, there are over 5,000, add to that. So it's almost an infinite number of things where you want to identify where are the Ds, where are the liberals in office. Our rule for candidate recruitment going into 2020 was that we were not going to touch a Republican, not any Republican. We were not going to judge our Republicans, and we were going to follow Reagan's 11th commandment. Thou shalt not say anything negative about a Republican. We had our hands full already fighting in the general with the Dems. And so then we get to the part of IDing candidates. I want you guys who feel comfortable in the chat, 3 words, give me what is your dream candidate? What are the 3 characteristics? Let's see what y'all come up with. You're shy. Okay, this is cool. Because you look and see that we probably have a dozen replies. Not a lot of them match. Okay. And so this is where we have to be realistic about, what area you're in. So in Texas, recruiting looks different depending on where you are. I live in a district that is considered red as red can be. And so part of our metric was in the 2018 election, we had a really tight race, surprisingly, between Senator Ted Cruz and Democrat Beto O'Rourke, who some of you may have seen as he took the presidential stage and became crazier than we thought he was the first time around. And it was a tight race. Cruz only ended up winning by 3 percentage points, but in a county like mine, he got 87% of the vote. So when you look at your very, very red counties, you may pull the pendulum further to the right in terms of what you're looking for. And you may find a different set of criteria than you do in a county like Dallas County or in Houston, which is predominantly an urban area, and they're dealing with different urban issues. And so I think point number 1 in identifying candidates, what are you looking for? Of course, I want conservatives. Of course, I would like to see that Republican voting history. I want to find people who are qualified. I want to find people who are capable. I want to find people who have integrity. It'd be really nice to not have skeletons in the closet. Each candidate should be able to run their own opposition research on themselves, honestly, so that they know if anything embarrassing is going to come up. And those are the places that I would start, and they should have integrity in their dealings, and they should be a community leader and well thought of. Those are the things that I would start with before I would get into any sort of purity test or any sort of markers, because it's going to be different depending on what state you live in. It's going to be different upon what region you live in. It's going to be different based upon yes, Glenna's keeping their zippers up. My goodness. I mean, there are so many integrity issues that we come across. And I will tell you, there is nothing worse than being placed in a position when you are in a position of leadership and someone who you have to defend has done things that are not defendable.
Yes.
There's nothing more embarrassing. It's something that when you have a media story blow up, you don't want to have to respond to it. You have no control of the narrative once something like that happens. This is the time where your consultants, where those of you who are reaching out to these candidates need to have an honest conversation and say, we don't want anything that embarrasses us as a whole. And now what happens when those things do embarrass you? Okay, because it happens. Sometimes you have that candidate come up or that incumbent where you have a very, questionable situation, driving under the influence, something that is embarrassing to the party. It's embarrassing to the brand. I will tell you what I have done with those candidates is I pick up the phone. I tell them that I am embarrassed. I'm sorry that we're in this position, that I forgive them, and I need them to do the best job that they possibly can to carry their conservative values. So they need to get the scandal behind them. It might be a quiet apology. It might be addressing the situation in a quiet way. I don't make the decision for them. I tell them that they need to speak with those who are close with them, spouses, campaign team, to address any of these things that come up. But we'd like to not get to that point as we're doing our identification with candidates in the first place. Somebody asked a question. I'm going to go ahead and we'll break off and we'll jump right into this question. What if you come from a background where your parents didn't vote? I am really of the point of view that we should not be judged for the sins of our parents. If that's non-voting or if that's voting the wrong way, if your parent was an activist for the wrong thing, we need to be able to differentiate ourselves as individuals. And so that wouldn't stop me at all. The other thing that I would say that comes up some more often than not is sometimes you will have a really young shining star and they will be told to wait their turn. Any of y'all ever heard that before? I'm going to throw something out there and take it or leave it, I guess I would say. I think if you have prepared, if you've done the work, and if you're willing to do the work, don't let anybody stop you from making a difference. And so I don't tend to agree with that. I tend to think that younger people need to step up sooner. And in fact, generationally, if you look at what we call the World War II the greatest generation. Look at what they were doing and the impact that they were making at 18, 19, 20, 21 years of age. Look at the founding fathers. I mean, if you look at the ages of the founding fathers, most of them were in their early 20s or younger. They were very young. For me, age is not a marker and a consideration. For me, I would in either direction. So not an ageist toward the young end. I'm not an ageist toward the older end either. There's another good question I saw just pop up. What about young adult children that might have made bad choices? My husband's considerably older than I am, and he has 4 grown children. I actually have 12 grandchildren. And he said something to me that I thought always really resonated. And he said, as parents, we can't take credit for all the good things our kids do, and we can't take the blame for all the bad choices they make. And I agree with that as well. We can all look back to different instances. I remember somebody's daughter stole a prescription pad, and do you have to address it? Yes. But that's, for me, when you get to something like that, less an issue of the candidate. It's more an issue of how you deal with the messaging, how you deal with the response, and how you move forward. And so deal with it, speak to it, and move forward in an honest way. Coming back to developing our candidates, this is really important. And this is where I think TFRW, this is where I think you all can really shine. Education is power. And you all have the ability to reach out to people. You all have the ability to identify people in your communities who inspire you. And so how do we give them the tools that they need? And that's how we think about it. We think of placing tools in the toolbox. Whether you know it or not, even asking